Dr. Bernard was going to speak.
Yes, I'm going to begin the presentation, and I'd like to ask Julie Braun-Martin to give sort of an overview of the process that the HR department does when we are advertising and selecting individuals for positions.
Okay, certainly are all on. Good evening. I was asked to sort of give you an overview of the process that we use. So the first step is that we become aware of an opportunity in our district, a vacancy or a position that is needed to be filled, and we post that vacancy on a variety of sources, including EdJoin, AXA, EdCal, CASBO, and other state and national organizations. Along with that, we attend recruitment fairs throughout the state, and that's done by our site and district administrators, and they go to some of the key universities, including Chico State, Sacramento, Davis, Stanford, Contra Costa County, St. Mary's, Brandman's, East Bay, CABE, CSHA, San Francisco Speech Clinic. When we do this, we put a posting up that includes the required credentials, the qualifications, and the experience that we're looking for. We ask for a letter of introduction, a resume, a job description is attached. We have a posting timeline, and we have a complete application that they must fill out. These papers are screened by administrators who are qualified to know the requirements of the position that we are looking for. So if we're looking at technology, we have our technology staff assist. Foods, we have our food services assist. Educators, we have our principals and our personnel staff and our dance center people assist. We're looking for the quality of the application packet, the grammar, the letter of intent, the resume, the message, the format. We're looking to see if the applicant holds the appropriate credentials. We're looking to see if the applicant holds the required degrees. We're looking to see if the applicant has relevant experience. Do they have current letters of recommendations, and from whom, including their supervisors? And then are there other criteria for the position to be filled? Once we've done the paper screening and we've determined the most outstanding candidates, then the interview panels are arranged. And to do that, we contact the presidents of the bargaining units to include representation according to the position being filled. So a site principal or district administrator would include all the unions and DMA representation. A food manager position would include M&O, supervisory unit, CST, and DMA representation. Prior to the scheduled interview date, we gather input from the community stakeholders if it's a principal's position or a position that's going to interact with the community. Those notes are summarized and provided to the interview panel during the orientation of panel members. And these sessions are usually conducted by the Assistant Superintendent of Personnel Services, the Director of Personnel Services, and the Assistant Superintendent of Student and School Support Services. The people that are serving on the panel receive a letter welcoming them to the interview and providing them with essential background information regarding the process and their role and responsibilities as a panel member. The Personnel Office contacts candidates and gives them an overview of what to expect and how to participate in the interview. On the day of the interview, an orientation is scheduled prior to the interview panel meeting to meet the candidates. And that orientation is completed by the facilitator of the panel, goes over the instructions with the panel members and their roles, sets norms for the interview process, gives procedures for the do's and don'ts of the process, talks about the importance of confidentiality, reviews the job description, goes over the community stakeholder notes, looks at the review and writing of the questions to be asked, and assigns roles and responsibilities to each of the panel members. There is note taking of the interviews, and there's a protocol for acknowledging each candidate. And then during the interviews, the facilitator supports the fact that the norms are followed and that all candidates are informed of the process for the interview and what to expect. At the conclusion of the interview, the panel members present their recommendation for the next steps. And that could be a second round of interviews with the Superintendent's Council or a decision for the supervisor of that department to proceed with reference checks. All candidates have a minimum of 2 reference checks completed, and that's a minimum. This includes talking to the supervisor and other background checks. That includes fingerprinting, DOJ, Megan's Laws, and other contacts as necessary. The questions on the reference check forms are to gather facts to identify if the person meets the qualification for the position, as well as to identify any possible concerns regarding the candidate. Once the staff has completed this extensive research process, they make a recommendation for hire. Personnel is authorized to make the offer to hire. The person is informed of the offer. An orientation is scheduled to go over the details of the position. And then, of course, at that point, feeling that the individual is interested and that we've done good research about the candidate, we then bring to the board a background packet which gives you some of the education and experience, and we try to provide that to you the week before. At the public board meeting, an overview of the candidate's qualifications is discussed and shared briefly before the recommendation is placed before the board for approval, and then the board makes the decision as to whether to approve the candidate or not. In terms of the process that we use, we try to have the board fully informed ahead of time of what the candidate's background is. But we also try to honor the fact that the candidates want to have a firm offer before they reveal to their previous employer that they're planning to leave their previous employer. And so we do try to have confidentiality for the candidate until it's confirmed and in hand that they have the position. We find that helps us attract a wider range of pool of candidates if we offer that confidentiality. And then, of course, there's always been the reality that rarely, but on occasion, a candidate is not approved by the board. So for that reason, we have just prepped the board in advance and then done an overview of the night of the meeting. So that's a brief outline.
Thank you. And I'm aware of the fact that in the recent weeks, months, since I've been here, there's been inconsistency in providing the board with bios about the individual, and that is something that will be remedied so that they will be built into the Friday updates that the board does receive. When I saw that they were going out, I did assume, and it was assumed by my administrative assistant, that they were being sent by the HR department, and they were not being received by the board in all cases. And so that is something that we are going to remedy. And so with that, I know that there's interest on the part of at least one board member, maybe more, to have other questions or comments, and we would like to entertain that.
I think two of the points that Ms. Braun-Martin's making are really critical to remember is, one, there's an extensive screening process that goes on. I think that's number one, to remember we're not plucking people off the street and say, here, take this job. And secondly, and I know this for a fact, having worked in 3 school districts and myself as an administrator, people sometimes seek a level of confidentiality, that, as you explained, and so sometimes you do lose candidates if you're not balancing that appropriately. So I think it's important to remember that staff goes through a screening of these candidates and does a thorough check before this comes to the board. And so there has to be a certain level of trust there that staff has done the appropriate screening. And secondly is that juggling act of balancing the confidentiality of that candidate with not alienating potential candidates, because sometimes it is the case where somebody will not apply if that person, if that's revealed to that person. So I know one of the issues we've grappled, 2 of them, one Dr. Bernard just addressed, which is the board who really has to approve or not the appointment does need to get that information in a timely manner and consistently. And so that's corrected, so that's the good news. And the second part that has come up from the public and from this board is a question around the public posting of that information, and how do you balance the juggling of the confidentiality for that candidate with appropriately notifying the public. And I know Mr. Lawrence has asked that question a couple of times, so this is the chance to really get to that resolution.
And first, one, I really appreciate the background, because I knew it was extensive. I didn't know it was that extensive, and it's impressive. And that's also reflected in, during my time on the board, I've just been tremendously impressed by the caliber of candidates that we've attracted, and it's throughout the district in all positions. I commend Ms. Braun-Martin, and currently she's implementing the process that's been set forth by the board. And Ms. Hansen is correct. I think we do have to balance confidentiality, but at the same time, I see a situation where we'd be able to perhaps 24 hours before the board meeting, so the day before